Enter this realm of holiness, where the whispers of eternity touch our souls. Selected 1. They're humiliated that they tried to compete with you after a heated debate broke out over you. Chaos has erupted in their world as you've been rising into your divine frequency because they've finally realized the terrible reality. Everything they tried to take from you, everything they tried to duplicate, and everything they claimed they could take. It all backfired so spectacularly that their entire operation is collapsing in front of their eyes. The cosmos has made its decision, and it is final. Genuine power cannot be faked. The repercussions of their spiritual conceit are now drowning others who attempted to compete with what you naturally embody. Someone must take a seat. Someone needs to receive some news that will completely rock them. It's not you, though. They couldn't even understand what was going on, but you've already passed the test. The universe was arranging your greatest descent while they were plotting your destruction. If it weren't so heartbreaking for those who bet against you, the irony would be lovely. They have been keeping tabs on you, noting the new acquaintances you meet, the doors that open for you, and the blessings that come your way. As they come to terms with something they never expected, you keep winning without even attempting to compete. Their eyes convey a tale of growing desperation. One of them was very outspoken about the impending spiritual heist, the one who had been posing as you on social media. They joked to their tricked fans via a live stream at the end of the evening. They'll be putty in our hands. Instead, it will be flowing through us. Their partner, who was equally delusional but possibly a little more circumspect, had been meticulously recording your daily activities, your spiritual activities, and even your physical appearance. They had produced whole folders filled with textual observations, films, and screenshots pertaining to your energy signature. According to their perverted reasoning, they thought that by comprehending how your gifts manifest on the outside, they would be able to access the interior source. They fail to see that your power is something you are, not something you own. Just like you cannot take someone else's DNA and expect it to function in your body, you cannot take someone else's essence. However, this lesson had to be learned the hard way, and it would cost them everything they believed they had created. Not just for you, but for everyone in their small plot. Everything changed on the night they decided to launch their spiritual attack. They entered your dreams like amateur robbers bursting into a stronghold while you slept soundly, shielded by powers they couldn't understand. Instead of finding vulnerability, they discovered something that would follow them around for the rest of their lives. Not just any guides, but the type of spiritual protection that only those who have earned it via sincere service and progress were able to receive, were waiting for them. The airy, Instagram-friendly spirits who make up New Age illusions weren't these. The violation of sacred space is a significant matter for these old and strong beings. Remember that night? How come you slept deeper than you had in months? Have you ever had a dream in which you were surrounded by an unbreakable cocoon of golden light? Chaos was raging in the spiritual world around you while you were sleeping under the safety of God. Your assailants were confronted by guardians they never thought were possible. The attack was a colossal failure. They were caught in a spiritual maze that they had created for themselves, in addition to not being able to access what they had come for. The methods they employed to attempt to enter your mind ended up becoming the bars of their own jail. They discovered, one by one, that they were unable to return to their own bodies and were unable to leave the nightmare world they had conjured up by trying to violate someone who was protected by God. During the attack, the imposter encountered something very terrifying. They were confronted by their own shadow, made to face every lie they had spoken and every real moment they had taken from your life and claimed as their own. The spiritual world provided them with a mirror reflecting their true selves, which were hollow, hopeless, and utterly cut off from any real source of strength. Even your $10 can answer amen to a child's prayer. Remember Jesus' compassion for the little ones. However, the actual destruction was taking place in their physical lives rather than in the spiritual world. The universe started methodically tearing down everything they had constructed on shaky grounds the instant they attacked you. Because of the questionable activities, Bank accounts were suspended. When partners finally saw each other clearly, marriages that had been maintained by mutual greed started to fall apart. Years-long legal issues suddenly became more urgent and required quick care. After their abortive attack, you woke up that morning feeling more energized than you had in years. Food tasted better, colors appeared more vibrant, and the lingering weight you had been carrying for months had just disappeared. You most likely thought it was because you were finally able to get a decent night's sleep. But something far more significant had happened. They had permanently severed the energetic lines that had been used to drain your vitality. Your intuition was totally free of the psychological contamination that had been interfering with it. You were working at full capacity for the first time in more than a year, and everyone around you could see the change right away. The simple query from an unlikely source, a mother-in-law who had long felt something wasn't right, started the argument that would reveal everything. She had also been observing, but not with any intention of praying. With the protective instincts of someone who could detect dishonesty from a great distance, she had been keeping an eye on things. This woman had been noticing the growing disarray in her family's life, the sudden changes in her daughter-in-law's attitude that suggested someone was leading two lives, and the financial instability that seemed to get worse despite claims of spiritual riches. She had conducted independent research, identified the true author of the stolen material, and had been covertly obtaining proof. "What have you done specifically?" she inquired during what was meant to be a dinner for celebration. "Your life is disintegrating, despite your constant mention about your abilities and spiritual ties. Your significant other is miserable. You're begging for money all the time. When will all of this alleged power truly result in a favorable outcome?" Like a blade poised to fall, the question hung in the air. How can you justify living such a deceptive life that you have begun to believe it yourself? How can you explain to someone that all you do for a living is replicate someone else's work and hope no one notices? The ensuing argument was explosive. Doubts that had been repressed for years suddenly surfaced. Couples who had been supporting one another's illusions abruptly realized how hopeless their circumstances were. The person who had been pretending to be you on the internet and passing off your experiences as their own was revealed. The mother-in-law went on, her voice piercing their frantic attempts at deflection. "I've seen the real person you're copying. You've been acting like someone else the entire time. I've witnessed their labor and sincere spiritual growth. They are not like you at all. In the meantime, you are going through the most significant healing of your life. You're simply a cheap counterfeit, taking advantage of someone else's genuine experience." Do you recall how abruptly your chronic pain started to subside? How could that nagging worry that had been bothering you for years just go away? How did your intuition become so acute that it nearly overwhelmed you? Unbeknownst to them, your assailants had set off a spiritual chain reaction. The healing was physical, biological, and molecular in nature rather than merely emotional or energetic. Suddenly, the agony from that old injury that the doctors warned would never entirely heal ceased. Overnight, the stomach problems that had been bothering you for years disappeared. Just like that, the embarrassing skin issue vanished. In a literal sense, your body was healing itself more quickly. The exposure was complete and brutal. It exposed every lie they had uttered, every untrue statement they had made, and every aspect of your spiritual identity that they had taken. Their internet fans started to see through the pretense. Videos that had before seemed thought-provoking suddenly appeared staged and shallow. Once powerful healing sessions now felt hollow and manipulative. The mother-in-law had proof ready, including screenshots demonstrating the original sources of content that had been taken, records of financial irregularities, and testimonies from those who had suffered losses as a result of their dishonest business methods. Like a prosecutor presenting evidence to a jury, she laid it all out on the dinner table. Giving $100 is not just money. It is a lamp, a prayer, a new beginning for a soul in darkness. The most terrible discovery, however, was still to come. Something more had occurred during the spiritual assault on you, something they had concealed from their own accomplices and allies. It had followed them back and settled in their own energy field after they had run against something in your consciousness that they were unable to deal with. Without warning, the dreams began, not the type you wake up from and forget, but the kind that permeate your waking existence and ruin every peaceful moment. They were feeling the unadulterated, unfiltered force of change that burns away all that is untrue and leaves just truth behind, something you had learned to transmute years before. Around this time, you most likely observed a sudden acceleration of your manifestation talents. Projects that had been put on hold for months started to advance at an unnatural rate. Unexpected sources of funding began to pour in. Opportunities seemed to arise out of thin air. You were unaware at the time that the main barrier to your innate prosperity had been their energy interference. No doctor could explain the impersonator's medical symptoms, which included a tremor in their hands that prevented them from creating material, nausea that wouldn't go away, and severe migraines that felt like their skull was being ripped open. The false frequency they had been attempting to sustain was being rejected by their body. Doctors were unable to explain the breakdown of their bodies. Physical and mental decline resulted from the strain of upholding their lies and the lingering effects of their spiritual transgressions. They were unable to eat, sleep, or focus on anything beyond the increasing certainty that they had roused an uncontrollable force. Select 1, alert code red. We're expanding quickly and creating an unstoppable media network that they can't destroy. Let's not mince words, though. The reality is still a mystery. It has been perverted. It has been suppressed by fear, algorithms, and censorship. But your heart never ceased seeing reality. You're still here for that reason. You never tapped out because of this. Because the simulation glitch was felt underfoot. You're done waiting for approval to ascend since you know that this world is crooked. The curious were not the target audience for the Obsidian Inner Order. For the dedicated, it was forged. This is for the full-time selected, the ones who arrive to take charge, the ones who see past appearances and take action regardless. Weekly Zoom calls that break through the clutter are held within. We impart lessons that most people were never supposed to hear. We receive training in spiritual technologies, tactics, and psychic warfare that have been suppressed for generations. This is the toolkit for the genuine ones, the ones that cannot be erased, the ones that cannot be controlled. Now is the moment to recall your identity. The description contains the URL. Your true life starts within. It started with the car being towed. The success symbols you've been using to uphold your reputation are repossessed when you are unable to pay for them. As neighbors looked on, the pricey vehicle that had served as evidence of their spiritual wealth was hauled off on a flatbed truck. Next came the house they couldn't really afford. Next followed the court dates, the bankruptcy proceedings, and the legal documentation. Their spouse, who may not have completely realized the scope of the lie but had been engaged in it, made a decision that would hasten their demise. They made the decision to preserve themselves when they had to decide between sticking to the lies and safeguarding their own destiny. They prepared to testify against their former accomplice, contacted authorities, and gathered evidence of the deception. Your inner world grew immensely while their material one fell apart. You started to get shockingly accurate prophetic dreams. People started seeking you out only to be around you because of how powerful your healing powers grew. After years of dormancy or suppression, the spiritual powers suddenly came roaring back into life. However, the spiritual devastation they had caused was far worse than the physical losses. The thing they'd met in your mind, the protector they'd attempted to evade, had inscribed them with truth rather than hate. The energy frequency of deceit was no longer something they could sustain. The weight of reality instantly caused every falsehood they attempted to tell to crumble. In virtually an instant, their internet presence collapsed. Videos were removed. Former followers started talking out about the manipulation they had encountered when social media accounts were suspended. Like a house of cards in a hurricane, the meticulously crafted facade of spiritual power fell apart. A $40 contribution is like the North Star guiding a lost soul at sunset. You were both fascinated and sympathetic as you saw this happen. You felt a sense of vindication because the truth was finally coming to light, but you also felt real sorrow for those who were so lost that they thought the only way to find light was to steal it from others. How little you had to do with their destruction was the most exquisite aspect of the whole unfolding. After their influence was eliminated from your life, you didn't curse them, send them bad vibes, or even give them any thought. You just kept developing, getting better, and becoming more true to who you are. Building a life on someone else's foundation inevitably leads to downfall, and they were solely responsible for it. Your world flourished as theirs burnt. After years of gradual development, the healing powers suddenly increased dramatically. You just stopped having physical illnesses that had been bothering you for decades. It was easy to overcome mental processes that had looked insurmountable, as though the cosmos were uploading information straight into your mind. You discovered that you were able to access wisdom and knowledge that you had never formally learned. Do you recall the first time someone confided in you that something they had been battling for years had been resolved simply by being around you? How did you first write it off as a coincidence before it kept happening? It wasn't a coincidence. That was your true power, at last able to flow unhindered. Souls who recognized your light because they bore similar frequencies took the place of those that had been observing you maliciously. Real spiritual fighters, real teachers, and real healers started to show up in your life with synchronistic accuracy. A spiritual family that recognized your development and magnified your gifts took the place of the phony community that had been draining your energy. To outside observers, your financial circumstances changed in ways that were almost magical. Suddenly, opportunities arose. Without you knocking, doors opened. You launched projects years ago. Then all of a sudden they picked up steam and started making money. The removal of their energy interference amplified exponentially the abundance they had attempted to steal from you. The biggest shift, though, might have been in how you felt about your own strength. Like a muscle that gets stronger under pressure, the onslaught they had launched against you had compelled you to unlock spiritual strength levels you were unaware you had. Under strain, you quickly developed psychic skills. You could now detect deceit from a great distance, discern people's motivations plainly, and defend yourself with ease. Youngsters started coming toward you fearlessly, attracted by an energy they could identify but not identify. The elderly would confide in you about things they had never told anyone else. Even skeptics were curiously soothed by your presence, and the tranquility they experienced around you defied reasonable explanation. Higher levels of knowledge and healing were accessed through the dreams that had previously served as entry points for their attacks. Your sleep was now a period of deep spiritual work and renewal rather than a vulnerable state. You started to receive information that would later turn out to be prophetic, warnings that would shield you from potential predators, advice that would prevent you from making costly blunders. You were receiving instruction from master teachers from other realms during these dream states. They showed you how to heal on quantum levels, how to manifest without going via the ego mind at all, and how to guard yourself against psychic attacks in the future. You somehow knew how to put the new information you learned each morning to use right away. You had never encountered a community of conscious souls and genuine healers like the one that grew up around you. These were genuine, soul-level ties with people who recognized the actual cost and responsibility of spiritual power, rather than the superficial spiritual ties that define New Age circles. You too started working on things that your previous self would have thought were impossible. The thing that most shocked you was how little work any of this took. Everything came together with divine timing and heavenly help after years of battling and forcing results. At the proper times, the right people showed up. Just when it was needed, the resources appeared. Before you could even worry about them, obstacles that ought to have been insurmountable just vanished. The difference between your experience and that of your assailants could not have been more striking. They were falling into turmoil and mayhem, while you were rising with ease. They seemed to close every door that opened for you. Each benefit that came your way brought to light their growing failure and loneliness. When you give $50, it is like the seed that falls on the fertile soil in Matthew 13. Not 1/40th will return to you, but perhaps 1/100th. It's likely that you were unaware of the drama that was going on behind the scenes in their life. In spectacular fashion, the impersonator's marriage was falling apart. The magnitude of their deceit and the financial mess they had caused with their bogus spiritual business had been exposed by their partner. Everything came to light as a result of their disagreement with their mother. The legal system started to take notice of their actions, including tax evasion, fraud, identity theft, and theft of intellectual property. The accusations were growing. Testimonies were provided by former clients who had suffered injury as a result of their phony therapy sessions. The evidence was indisputable and overwhelming. The mother-in-law turned into an odd ally in your defense after initiating the dispute that revealed their deceit. She had refused to allow the sham to continue in her presence, even though she didn't know you personally. She had recognized the hallmark of genuine spiritual development. Her courage to challenge authority set off a series of events that eventually liberated a number of others from the web of deceit and manipulation. The individual who had been using your online persona was cut off from the source from which they had been parasitically feeding. Their content became blatantly phony and repeated. The efficacy of their treatment sessions vanished. Their prophecies ceased to materialize. Their supporters started to raise uneasy concerns after observing the sharp drop in quality. When did you first start receiving messages from random people expressing gratitude for work you couldn't recall doing? When individuals would come up to you at spiritual gatherings and say that you had transformed their life through sessions you had never led. You became aware of the scope of the ongoing identity theft at that point. The resulting legal issues weren't fortuitous or arbitrary. The universe makes sure that people who break spiritual law suffer repercussions in the material world. Charges of fraud were brought. Intellectual property that had been stolen was made public. Investigations were conducted into financial manipulation. The evidence utilized to prosecute them was the same technology they had used to steal your content. The most terrible punishment, however, was internal, even while their entire world fell apart around them. During their assault on you, they had come into contact with something they weren't ready to incorporate. Like lightning striking a tree, the energy you had spent years of devoted practice channeling and transforming struck their unprepared consciousness. Because they had attempted to avoid the preparation and purification required for such development, their spiritual awakening was being experienced as trauma rather than transformation. The dreams they were having were a direct result of the violation they had attempted, not just a random psychological phenomenon. Their unprepared brains were unable to handle the intensity, as your guides showed them exactly what they had attempted to steal. They were experiencing the weight of the duty that accompanies true spiritual authority, and they were crumbling. In the meantime, your own spiritual progress was accelerating at a rate that, had you not been adequately prepared throughout your years of genuine development, would have been overpowering. The healing modality that emerged through you came straight from the source through your cleansed channel. It wasn't anything you learned from books or courses. You started to see why you had to isolate yourself, why some relationships had to stop, and why you had had to build up your inner strength as a result of financial difficulties. All of the difficulties you had encountered had been preparing you for this time, when your gifts would fully manifest. Without you promoting yourself or advertising, people started looking for you to do healing work. Spiritual communities began to hear of a person who could help bring about quick, long-lasting change. Your services waiting list got longer than you could handle. Genuine spiritual service naturally brought financial riches, which started to flow in ways that respected your needs and your skills. For people who had suffered from the same type of spiritual deceit that you had conquered, you were able to provide the most deep healing. Someone who could relate to their experience and help them reestablish their own genuine connection with the source was found in you by many who had been duped by false instructors, depleted by energy vampires, or deceived by phony spiritual societies. For those who had endured comparable spiritual attacks, your narrative offered a ray of hope. When you sent $15, it may seem small, but like everything given in faith, it will be multiplied in heaven. Baby, you started sharing your story to help people spot the warning signs of spiritual manipulation and learn how to defend themselves against predatory practitioners, not to get attention or following. Your journey's circular nature became abundantly evident. The attack they launched against you had sparked your greatest spiritual awakening. The community they drove you away from had been replaced by something infinitely more genuine and encouraging. The seclusion they had imposed upon you had been essential for your most profound healing and development. The final secrets came to light as their dispute concerning you reached its violent finale. Their operation had been funded by sources that are now requesting payment. They were openly disavowed by the guru they claimed to have studied under. It was discovered that the credentials they had displayed were fake. Testimonials from happy customers were revealed to be false. Instead of feeling vindicated personally, you saw all of this unfold with a sense of cosmic justice. This was about truth finally triumphing over deceit, not about retaliation. An imbalance that has been warping the spiritual marketplace for too long was being corrected by the universe. Their fixation on outdoing you had exposed your true nature to the entire spiritual community, which was a lovely irony. Instead of trying to dampen your light, they had made it visible to all. Their attacks on your character in public had backfired so spectacularly that you came out of it more respected and credible than you had ever been. The chosen ones identify with one another through resonance rather than rivalry. People like you started reaching out to the spiritual world as your genuine power became apparent, not to steal or duplicate, but to work together and co-create. Beyond what any one person could have achieved on their own, the network of conscious beings that sprung up around you became a force for good. In spiritual circles, their story became a cautionary tale about the consequences of trying to base your practice on someone else's work. However, your tale served as motivation for what may happen when you follow your real path, despite pressure from others to deviate from it. Months later, you came to the final realization that everything had happened precisely as it was supposed to. Their attack on you had been a cosmic test that had uncovered your actual strength and sparked your destiny rather than the random act of spiritual aggression. They had unwittingly been the driving force behind your biggest change, and you were almost thankful for that. You can sense the reality of your own experience echoing in each line as you read these words now. You are aware of what it's like to be observed, imitated, and assaulted by others who interpret your brightness as weakness. However, you are also familiar with the sensation of rising from that obscurity with greater strength, clarity, and power than before. Everyone else attempted to pick you, but you are the one who picked yourself. When others attempted to keep you broken, you are the one who repaired yourself. When the powers of evil attempted to put out your light, you were the one that persisted. And now that you've burned through their jealousy and come out on the other side, you're a living example of how true power can only be won by having the guts to be who you were always intended to be.